I marked this because I notice you're still c-betting from small blind, and I think it's going to
Yes.
be simpler for you to just revert to an entire check range strategy. You can still attack all the hotspots on the check raise, and it's even better to do versus the big blind because they stab wide with a wide range. Um, and it's going to prevent you from some of the mistakes you're making in the bet check line. It's also going to prevent you from forcing aggression in certain spots by building a pot too early. Not necessarily because of the fact that you'll be still check raising aggressively, but let me show you what happens sometimes. This I thought was a good barrel. This hand I actually did mark as a really good triple barrel. Like you have a 7
Mm-hmm.
high hand on a board where I really think his
King.
range is going to be fairly pressured to the river unless he does have a king, which he won't have that often. So
Uh,
I thought this was a
I
good barrel.
yeah, I have this idea with these barrels now that if the board is low and turn is high, I can pretty much barrel pretty much like really a lot.
Yeah, and you have a
Is
gutter
it
here
true?
too, so it's more than right.
Yeah. And this c-betting small blind, actually, I wanted to bring it up. I think I did took it on Pio on Locket course
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
there, and then I saw night vision. Steve was like checking for range.
Yeah,
So
it was an adjustment we made from the PO unlock
mhm.
course once we started doing more database analysis and realizing that the environment was already stabbing big blind too much. Once we
Okay,
saw
and
that, we basically said we don't really even have incentive to be c-betting even when we're at a huge range advantage because they're still stabbing too much like on the boards where we have a very big range advantage. So now we're just
and
smacking them with check raises and it's a simpler
yeah,
approach too, which is cool.
and I like it more also.
It fits
Uh,
your it fits your personality better too.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Cool. So this is another situation. It's similar to the 8-6 club where we're raising an open and a straight draw that has a lot of equity. It's
Hmm.
better though because now we're out of position. So it has a little bit more merit, and I think that should be intuitive. Like our playability is worse out of position. It's also a lower board that makes more sense to have a higher merge check raising range on. So I didn't mark it as a mistake. I just marked it as sort of another trend that I'm noticing that you seem to be favoring still check raising, and I just wanted to point out like this hand has
Hmm.
more than enough playability to check call, having both showdown value and the open-ended straight draw. Um, Obviously not a mistake though. I thought it was played fine. I think the bet on the river is a little thin, but it still is okay. This is a spot where I think you're okay to call this with a little bit deeper stacks, but generally I want you to be calling like pocket ace
Yeah.
plus here. I noted this because I see two hands happening in a row here, where you're choosing to check raise in this spot, and I just see it as, especially with a pair plus a club, again, this sort of like a realization thing. Like he could jam on you here with like black aces and that would suck. Or
Mm-hmm.
he could jam on you with ace king with an ace of clubs and that would kind of be bad too. So it's a spot where
And
I think that this is mixed strategy, but I noticed that you're always taking the aggressive action, so I just wanted to bring it up because
mhm.
it shows that you still have a tendency to overpolarize slightly. You're not considering the call option in spots where I think it's quite good. So that's fine. And then I see like this hand too, which is the same thing. And now this even looks a little
Yeah.
bit more aggressive because your hand is even stronger
Mhm.
relative to the fives. It seems like it's just falling straight into the call range. Now don't get me wrong, you could argue for check raises here like as mixed strategies, but like neither of these spots were hot spots in my opinion.
Yeah,
Like this one's
I
almost a
see.
hot spot.
This is again exactly these ends what I need to eliminate my racing range here. Exactly these ends what I need to put this calling line.
I think just with this part of your range, it's not necessarily best to be raising. One thing that might be like causing you to want to raise more is that you don't trust your multi-street bluff
Yeah.
catching skills enough. There's some new videos in the Dropbox that I think will help with that a lot in terms of understanding multi-street bluff catching concepts more. Because don't get me wrong, this is not a huge problem. You'll still be a big winner if you do this, but at the point at which, well, I could talk about this from a few different ways. You're probably never going to have to worry about playing in an environment for so long, especially when you scale to high stakes and maybe move to Bovada, where like people are going to be noting you up and they'll know that you're the guy that check raises way too much with merged ranges. You'll probably be getting decent credit for this your whole career, but I would like you to develop the skills of becoming a more efficient bluff catcher so that you don't avoid the better line, which I think it just is with it. Like I don't think this is enough of a
Yeah.
check raise hotspot to justify that we have to check raise this hand, which is so clearly to me like able to be check called. I guess that's just it. If this was 6-4 deuce, you have more of a hotspot for a check raise, and it makes more sense to be check raising merged because it's a low texture. And then go ahead and check raise pairs all day, but let's at least centralize it towards those boards.
I mean, by raising here, it's I'm just avoiding a little bit harder way, but the way more efficient way to get money good in.
It's a harder way, but more efficient way of putting money into the pot.
Yeah, it is. So I think I'm like this raising part, whatever you have equity raise, this is okay.
Now, if I added the data point that he overfolds substantially here, now your check raise has a lot more merit, but we don't have that data point because that's not what happens in this formation on these types of textures, as far as we know. Cool.
I agree.
Here's a spot where we just violated the turn code. I don't think we have enough equity here, and we have no reason to believe it's a hot spot. He's going to peel you with a lot of draws, and you're getting that feeling here where once you bet, we don't have good vision on the river as to how we can exploit a future street.
This started building up on flop confusion. I mean, it just feels so much like check for me on the flop, or that check call I think is better, or check raise. I don't know what to do on flop.
I think check raise or check call are both fine. I just don't necessarily think that the turn barrel is doing all that much. Like, don't get me wrong, you have a gutter plus 5-out pair, which is sometimes live.
Is it check call then?
On the flop, you mean? Or on the turn?
Turn.
Yeah, you could probably justify a check call with your equity, just because he could be betting some flush draws at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a close hand. I don't think it's like a huge deal, to be honest. Let's get into some subtler concepts. This is going to be revolving around the equity realization that I mentioned before. You're calling a 3-bet from the blinds, calling a c-bet. You peel a double gutter, and with this stacked pot ratio, I don't think that you're getting check raised enough, but I just think that like with the type of equity that you have, the check back option is just going to be better because you get to retain all of your equity. And if the goal here is to get him off of ace king, you can still do that on the river. Like, you have position. You can wait for him to check again and just bluff him off a lot of rivers after getting your equity realization.
This 8 of clubs hits really well this.
Well, the 8 doesn't really, I don't think it improves him a ton. I'm just saying that it improves your hand.
Even more.
Like, it improves your hand to a double gutter that you really want to make sure you realize the equity of.
Yeah.
And
if that way.
If the intention is, well, I have to get him off of ace king right now, what I'm saying is we could wait, make sure that we realize the equity so that we don't blow ourselves off of our double gutter and then bet the river. And to me, it just seems like a more balanced option in terms of, and by balanced, I mean exploitable.
So what you want to say is the times we are getting, to get him off ace king here is already questionable in the first place, but the times we are getting him off ace king isn't worth this loss of equity.
Yes.
But we are getting
and one
here.
Of the main reasons I think is because you also have that opportunity after you check back to get him off on the river.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. I see that.
So it's the main thing that changes when you have really good qualities of equity with your hand, especially when you're in position, that you would rather realize it and just delay the bluff so that you can't be check raised because it's painful when that happens.
You know, I think I was scared there. What's going to happen if I check back and he bets, but I know it's not worth of
well, first of all, that's paranoid because he's not going to overbluff that spot on the river.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
And second of all, what'll happen is you'll realize a pair or better like 30% of the time or more, and then when he does still check, which will happen frequently, you'll have an opportunity to bluff him off ace king. 3-bet. So this is the hand I marked to go along with that ace queen concept where I said it might start to make more sense to check back certain hands. Here's why. We know that this check raise line is the indicator of a line that the volatile players like to take merge. They also like to bluff it. We've seen it. It's consistent. It's consistent that they have inconsistencies in this line. Not to confuse you, but it's funny. So
yeah, okay, I can understand.
Okay, so what I want to do is start by
check backing.
Yes, because when I was looking at this, I was like, okay, something's wrong. We're not able to defend ace king because these guys merge check raise. So bet folding, while it's correct, can't be the best line. So then I go one step backwards in terms of problem solving. I'm like, okay, if they're going to play like this consistently enough that we can't bet call ace king, and I don't really get much other benefit from betting ace king other than it's a simplified way to play my whole range, then maybe from an exploitative perspective, as long as it doesn't like completely make me so easy to play, I can just check back the ace king, guarantee my realization to the turn, prevent him from slashing my realization by check raising bluffs and whatever other merged bets, and raise the EV of my ace king. Now, the downside of it is, well, what if he just starts launching into us on the turn and river with bluffs? But like you said, ace king can still bluff catch if we deem it appropriate. So to me,
exactly.
it seems a little bit more reasonable as a strategy adjustment in a pool where there is a certain degree of volatility around this check raise that we want to go for more equity preservation in position.
Okay, this check back basically gives us equity realization.
Yeah, we can do it with ace queen too, actually.
Yeah.
We don't want to let's do it as a simple rule. We don't want to really be betting anything for value. Like ace king is basically value. Can we agree?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to be betting any value hands that won't be able to bet call because of the volatility of the pool in this line. I think that makes sense as a general rule.
Can I make myself... I'm thinking how to solve this problem at the moment. Can I make it a rule? If I have here, for example, ace king with spade, I can start betting, but without any backdoor equity, I start checking.
Yes, because ace king with spade can call a check raise.
Yes. Okay.
That's it.
Okay, then I think this is the easy way to draw a line for me.
I agree. 3-bet. So here's a spot where we could play that check back. I just marked it again for pattern recognition.
Nothing going on. Check back. Call at least every turn, and then decide river.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Calling. Here's a spot I would have rather seen you stab. I really like your equity with this hand for potentially pairing multiple times. Out of position is just going to be check folding often enough because he's giving up in a multi-way pot basically on a board that doesn't connect well with his range. And small blind will just have enough hands he can fold, even though his range is like generally pretty strong here. So in the realm of you having a good, well-randomized bluffing opportunity, in a spot where the imbalances are trending towards incentivizing stabbing, because out of position's range here, Stony, UTG, his range will be weaker. Yeah. His range will be weaker than it should be in theory, for the most part. They just don't protect the checking range well enough.
Okay.
Here, we didn't talk about this so much in group, but the hotspots for these raising flops, they don't apply so much when we're facing the pre-flop raiser and we're the in-position player. Mainly because I think the playability of us just calling more is better. You could still raise, it's fine, but I also just think that, like, again, when you have position, the playability of a hand like this goes up substantially to play as a call. And by playability, I just mean like the amount of opportunities that you'll have to do things that you couldn't do were you out of position. I know that's kind of like a phony way of explaining it, but like think about all of the advantages of being in position. Equity realization, the ability to stab efficiently when he just gives up. I mean, those are probably the main two.
Raising for value.
Value bidding more efficiently on the river when check two. So like all of that kind of makes me want to play more of a flatting range and less of a raising range on the flop. And the main reason that I'm advocating is because I wouldn't want you to get noted up as somebody who like doesn't raise enough value and only bluff raises in position. I see it creating imbalances in your strategy that if you're not aware of might not work for you, and I don't think they're all that necessary. So like on a board like this, I think I would just have no raising range period as button. And maybe that's slightly off in theory, but I like simplifying it in terms of just creating overall simpler strategic options for yourself.
Yeah, and I understand that when we raise or check raise, we're going for fold equity, and since we're in position, we don't need that much fold equity, and that's why I guess calling makes a bit more sense. And Because it's just we don't need to generate all that fold equity that we do when we raise.
It's one way of putting it. I think the reason that you're sensing that is because we have more opportunities to win the pot as in position just kind of naturally. We have more playability. I guess that's how I would phrase it. The reason we don't need to force things so much is because we actually have more playability as the in position. So it's a simplified way of explaining what's going on, but I think it works for practicality. Here I like the fact that you're checking back and you're not challenging a hotspot that's not there. The stab on the turn is correct, and then the give up is correct. I don't really want you to be raising king 8 off on the cut. King 9 I think is kind of like the cutoff. No pun intended. Check raise is good. And I marked this hand as an exclamation point because I liked how you're seeing that this is a proper board to reopen in the you know, after you usually give up. Now we have the ace and the queen runoff where it's really putting a ton of pressure on his merged hands. So I marked it as a really good application of reopening. And I want to encourage it because we talked about how there are exceptions to that rule, and that was a really good find.
The same concept here, where our hand has decent realization to just be able to check back, and it's a board that he's probably going to be hitting very hard, so we should expect a check raise at a higher rate than usual. So I would favor checking back there.
This spot I thought was a good fold once you chose this bet sizing, but I think that the better play with as much equity as you have is to put him to a harder position and just jam for pot, a little over pot. When you jam for pot, you're basically going to... It's an equity retention concept in the sense that your hand is going to be able to see its realization over the next 2 cards, which you have a decent amount of outs, and that also puts him to a harder spot so that he can't semi-bluff as much shit. Like, the last thing that you want is, like, he's jamming here with an ace-jack with the jack of diamonds and getting fold equity when he would have folded that hand had you jammed. Or he's jamming with pocket deuces where maybe he would have folded that had you jammed. There's portions of his range that could slash your EV where they would have had the fold had you maximized your fold equity. So it's just like a shift in initiative almost that I think works to your advantage when you already have a gutter and 2 potentially live overs. With this stacked pot ratio, you really shouldn't be bet folding. It's either you're checking out or you're just ripping.
Yeah. Okay.
Simple fix. Doesn't happen that often because it's a weird stacked pot ratio. A standard on the flop. Turn call is good. It's basically the type of spot where, yeah, you're floating in position with decent playability, and you'll have a pretty good opportunity to potentially stab river for a cheap price if he does give up, which is what happens. I marked this hand basically as sometimes you'll see me put like an exclamation. I think that's what I meant to put here because it's basically like a compliment. Like, this is a really good bet size for you to use versus a range of his that's polarized on the river. In other terms, in other words, the hands that are giving up on the river for him are going to be folding to a $10 bet, the same as like a $25 bet for the most part. So I think you're giving yourself a pretty good price point, and I just marked it to kind of note that. I marked as a potential indicator of forced river aggression just because of the fact, I know this is a line that we advocate to be stabbing. That being said, it's such a pressure card on the turn that I think you're going to be dealing with a relatively well-defined get-to river range from him. And that, I think, is going to make this harder to justify. Add to the fact that you're blocking some of his offsuit spade insta-folds on the river, like stuff like ace-jack with the jack of spade. So blockers are sort of the minority data point here. I don't necessarily like your blockers all that much. I don't think they're awful, but I just notice I'm blocking certain hands in his range that might be on snap fold.
Okay.
And I'm just like pointing that out. Moreover, I think the pool is going to fold too many offsuit pocket pair in this spot on the turn, and I think that it's probably trending toward a spot where he calls river enough or too often, because I think the defining point in the hand is when he faces the turn barrel. In other words, it's another situation where when he folds too often on the turn, it's getting worse to justify an exploitative river bluff, and I think that's what we have here. So in general, also he's button versus UTG, so it's probably a tighter pre-flop cold call range to begin with. But in general, I think it's just a spot where, yes, this is a overall good spot to go 2 barrels in terms of line recognition, but in terms of a little bit more subtlety of texture, range versus range interaction recognition, it becomes a little bit more unattractive to me because I don't want to test a river range that I already thought was overfolding the turn. So I just noted it as kind of a spot to talk about more than anything, and not a huge leak.
But I need to be a bit careful. But
yeah, just to develop more awareness.